All right, shalom, shalom. This is Brother Yashimai from the GMS Atlanta camp. All praises, all glory, all honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Kakadash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, whom taught us this truth. This video is going to be going into the tribe of Manasseh, which are today's so-called Cubans. And I say that, they are the so-called Cubans because that's what Esau Edom has named us. We have become that byword and proverb as mentioned in the scriptures. But the so-called Cubans are the tribe of Manasseh. And so we'll start off here with this map here. And we can see Cuba on the left and Cuba on the left and Puerto Rico on the right. And we will also get back into that. So let's go ahead and get started here. We'll start off on Genesis 48 and verse 5 because Ephraim and Manasseh, although they were not born of the loins of Jacob, they were born to Joseph when he was in Egypt. However, through the power and the spirit of Yahweh Shai, Ephraim and Manasseh were both adopted into the blessing of the tribes of Israel. And so that's what we're going to start off here on Genesis 48 and 5. All right, now this is Jacob, also known as Israel, talking to Joseph. All right, it says, and now thy two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt, before I came unto thee into Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. So this is the patriarch Jacob, the patriarch of the tribes, absorbing them in. And while we're here, we'll go ahead and get the word Manasseh. All right, let's go ahead. Manasseh. And that is Manasseh. And that means made to forget. Okay? That's what Manasseh means. And that's how you say it in the Paleo. Manasseh, because there is no E in the Paleo. Okay? So let's get, it says, let's jump down to verse 16 here. And let's get the blessing here, okay? Okay, verse 16, and we're going to get to 19. It says, the angel which redeemed me from all evil blessed the lad. So this is Jacob putting the blessing on Ephraim and Manasseh. Says, and let my name be named on them. So there you go. Now I know that I think it was like a couple of years ago, the prophets were going in because there was some other camps going off saying that Ephraim and Manasseh were not part of the tribes because they weren't Jacob's son. Well, here we have the scriptures showing that they were being absorbed into the blessing of the 12 tribes. And that's why we're in Genesis 48. All right, it says, let my name be named on them. So just like how Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai put his name on us by calling us Yasharallah, right? With the root word being Yah, he put, Jacob put his name on Ephraim and Manasseh. All right, it says, in the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. Verse 17. And when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. So here we see Jacob puts his right hand on Ephraim, and Ephraim is the younger of Manasseh. And so that's why when Joseph saw it, it says it displeased them because, the custom was that the firstborn would get the lion's share of the blessing from the father. All right, it says, he tried to move it. Verse 18, it says, and Joseph said unto his father, not so, my father, for this is my firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. 19, and his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. But truly, his younger brother shall be greater than he. That's talking about Ephraim, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. So this is how Ephraim becomes the head tribe of the northern kingdom. Even though he was the younger of the two, Ephraim would get, would be the head of the northern tribe. All right, now a couple things here that that we need to point out here is the map, because Ephraim was on the left side, right, according to Isaac, and according to where Isaac was standing, and Ephraim was on the right side. Salakia, I think I said that wrong. Manasseh was on the left side. Ephraim was on the right side, and it shows you that even through the Spirit that is still true to this day, because look at the land masses. Cuba is on the left, which is Manasseh, and Puerto Rico is on the right, which is Ephraim. So it just shows you that these two brothers would dwell amongst each other even in the latter days, right? Now, let's get something else here. Let's get the flags too here. So this also shows you the resemblance of the two. Now, this is the Puerto Rican flag and the Cuban flag, showing you that they are both one of the same ilk. Now, we know that these flags do not represent us as a nation, but through the Spirit, these are certain attributes that we can see that kind of feed into the prophecy. These are dark sayings that are being showed, and through the Spirit of Yahweh, he put these things so that we can be able to pick up on them if the Spirit is dealing with you. All right, because knowing these tribes, is part of the spirit of prophecy, man. Because nobody else knows these tribes. Esau, Edom, and these people that go to these to these seminaries, they can't tell you who they are. But through the Spirit, starting with the elders and the apostles, it's been given unto us, man. Amos 3:7 goes into that. All right, so let's go ahead and jump from here, and we'll go into the scriptures here. We'll go into 2 Ezra 13, all right, and 40, because, the next question should be how did they get from Israel to Cuba? Well, this is how, 2 Ezra 13 and 40, those are the 10 tribes which were carried away prisoners out of their own land in the time of Hoshea the king, whom Shalmaneser the king of Assyria led away captive, and he carried them over to the waters, and so came they into another land. But they took this counsel among themselves, that they would leave the multitude of the heathen and go forth into a further country where never mankind dwelt, that they might there keep their statutes which they never kept in their own land. All right, so how they got to Cuba is going through the Horn of Africa, right here, going through the Horn of Africa, coming down here, and then coming into South America, going into Cuba, Puerto Rico, also known as Hispaniola, and then coming up into South America and into the United States and into Canada. All right, so let's go ahead and get some more scriptures here to show that prove that Manasseh, or the so-called Cubans. Let's go to Deuteronomy 33 and 13. It says, "And of Joseph he said, Blessed of Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai be his land." Okay, so now, when Joseph is mentioned, we know that Joseph is going into Ephraim and Manasseh, as we just read in Genesis 48, right? All right, so it says, "Blessed of the Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai be his land, for the precious things of heaven, for the dew and for the deep that couches beneath." Okay, and so when it talks about the precious thing brought forth by, it says, for the dew and for the deep that couches beneath, that's going into the seas of Cuba. Let's go ahead and get that. Beautiful seas in Cuba. Because right now, as it is, we know that Cuba is in a very low state because of the sanctions that America and the beast system puts on them, because they don't want to bend the knee. All right, so even though they don't know it, even through the spirit, they are going against Esau Edom. All right, so it says Cuba is renowned for its stunning beaches and vibrant turquoise waters. Varadero is a popular choice with its 22 kilometers of white sand, while Playa Pilar on Cayo Guillermo offers a more secluded paradise. Cayo Largo del Sur boasts beautiful white sand beaches, and Guarda la Vaca, which means really, like in Spanish, that means hide the cow. And Guarda la Vaca is known for its calm, shallow waters. Other notable beaches include Cayo Coco, Cayo Santa Maria, and Playa Ancon. And these are some of the images. So this is what it's going into when it says beautiful is the land, and that couches beneath, man. Look at those beautiful waters, man. That's cleaner than any beach I've ever been to. That's for sure. Oh my, man, look at this thing. And so through the spirit, man, these are small things that we can pick up on and show. Check out that water. You can see even the fishes from here. And I don't know how old this photo is, but check it out, man. For them to be up that high and still be able to see, because going into those sanctions, we know that Cuba doesn't have the biggest technology, but even with bad technology up that high, you can still see how beautiful those oceans are. So that's what that's going into. Salakia, I don't mean to be too long-winded, but I'm like legitimately taken back by how beautiful those waters are. So that's what it means. It says, and for the deep that couches beneath, and for the precious fruits brought forth by the sun, and for the precious things put forth by the moon. Okay, so now, let me see. Oh yeah, and for the chief things of the ancient mountains. Now let's go ahead and go into that. Cuba, 3 mountain ranges. Cuba's got mountain ranges of Cuba. Cuba has 3 main mountain ranges: the Sierra Maestra in the southeast, the Escambray Mountains in the central region, and the Cordillera de Guanico in the west. The Sierra Maestra is the highest and most rugged range, containing Pico Turquino, the highest point in Cuba. All right, so that's what those mountains are going into. Now, while we have those mountains brought up, we're going to go into a brief history of Cuba, because even through the scriptures, though we can point to let me finish that thought. Even through the scriptures, we can point to physical attributes, whether they're on a map or whether they're natural resources. Another way to identify the tribes is, are they under the curses? And the answer is yes, which we are going to get into. But before we get into that, there was one thing also that was said. It says, let me see. Let's see. And there you go. Verse 14. And for the precious fruits brought forth by the sun. Now, Cuba has a lot of exotic fruits here. It says Cuba's warm climate allows for a wide variety of tropical fruits and vegetables. Common fruits include mango, papaya, pineapple, guava, mamey, zapote, as well as bananas and plantains, which are staples in the Cuban diet. Vegetables like yuca, sweet potatoes, and malanga are also popular. And it names some more: tamarind, starfruit, cheromaya, yuca, malanga, plantains. These are the fruits brought forth from the sun, as mentioned. Man, take a look at this. This ain't talking about, this ain't talking about China. It ain't talking about America. It ain't talking about Europe. That's for sure. It's definitely not talking about the pit. So through the Spirit, we can line up these scriptures, and let's go ahead and get into a brief history of Cuba. I'm not going to read all of it, but I'm just going to read some of it to show that they are under the curses. Okay, it says the island of Cuba was inhabited by various Native American cultures prior to the arrival of the explorer Christopher Columbus in 1492. Spain conquered Cuba and appointed Spanish governors to rule in Havana. Now, let's go ahead and get a quick precept on that. Now we're going to jump back and forth between the curses to prove. And then I got one last article that shows the history of what it says. So this is Deuteronomy 28:36. It says, Yahweh Hashem Yahushua shall bring thee and thy king, which thou shalt set over thee unto a nation which neither thou no, that's not what I wanted to get. Where did that? Moreover, and there shall be, because therefore, there you go, right here, 49, Salakia. It says, Yahweh Hashem Yahushua shall bring a nation against thee from afar, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flieth, a nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. That's going into Esau, Edom. So another way to identify if the Cubans are Israelites is, do they fit under the curses? And the first one is, yeah, they do, because Christopher Columbus was a Spaniard, one of the kingdoms of Esau, Edom. All right. It says, appointed governors. Let me see. Havana was occupied by Britain in the years following. Okay, right here. So it says, in the early Catholic regime. Now, let's get into pre-Columbian. It says, Cuba's earliest known human inhabitants inhabited the island. The oldest known Cuban site, La Visa, dates from 3100 BC, a wider distribution of sites. And, we got to be careful with these dates, because, we know that Esau Edom, just as he covers the faces of the judges, he also changes histories and, tries to throw things off, right? So that, this is that covering cast, right? But let's continue on. It says, Spanish conquest. This is what I want to get right here. So it says, So it says, okay. Let's start here, because again, brothers can read these on their own. I'm just trying to prove the point here. All right. It says, so in 1511, Diego Velázquez de Cuellar set out from Hispaniola to form the first Spanish settlement in Cuba, with orders from Spain to conquer the island. The settlement was at Baracoa, but the new settlers were greeted with stiff resistance from the local Taino population. The Tainos were initially organized by Kaki Hatue, who had himself relocated from Hispaniola to escape Spanish rule. All right, so I want to hone in on that for a quick second here, because he went from Hispaniola, right, which is modern-day Haiti and the Dominican, and he went to Cuba. Why did he do that? Because, as we read in 2 Ezra 13 and 40, the 10 tribes came together, all right? They went into South America, so they knew that they were all around each other. Matter of fact, in the book, The Lost Tribes, and Paradise Lost, the Seminole Indians, which I'm going to do a lesson on them, but the Seminole Indians, based, in the southeast coast of the United States of America, they told Mestizo, the Edomites, that they had other brethren on an island nearby. So I say all that to say this: the Northern Kingdom knew where they were all at, because they all came together and they would travel amongst each other. All right. So again, through the Spirit, we can see that these are the 10 tribes. All right. So that's why Hatue escaped from Hispaniola to go to Cuba because, again, he knew where his brethren were. They all came together. They all left the Assyrian captivity and came here, so they all knew where they lived. All right, it says, after a prolonged guerrilla campaign, Hatui and successive chieftains were captured and burnt alive, and within 3 years, the Spanish had gained control on the island. In 1514, a South Coast settlement was founded. Anyways, this is Hatue. Now, check this out. It says, clergymen of Bartolome de las Casas observed a number of massacres initiated by the invaders. Notably, the massacre near Camagüey of the inhabitants of Caunawa. According to his account, some 3,000 villagers had traveled to Manzanillo to greet the Spanish with food and were without provocation butchered. The surviving indigenous groups fled to the mountains or the small surrounding islands before being captured and forced into reservations. One such reservation was Guanabacoa. Today is a suburb of Havana. So those are those mountains that we read in Deuteronomy 33. And for the chief things of the ancient mountains and the precious things of the lasting hills, they fled into those mountains, into those 3 mountain ranges. All right. Now, while we're on Hatue, let's go ahead and get this famous quote that he's known for. It says, right here, it says, before he was burned, a priest asked Hatue if he would accept Jesus and go to heaven. Las Casas recalled the reaction of the chief. Hatue, thinking a little, asked the religious man if Spaniards went to heaven. The religious man answered yes. The chief then said, without further thought, that he did not want to go there but to hell, so as not to be where they were and where he would not see such cruel people. This is the name and honor that the God and our faith have earned. So even though he wanted nothing to do with these Edomites, man. And you know what? This is what we're doing, man. We want nothing to do with these Edomites either, man. Our people got to wake up. So-called Cubans, you are from the tribe of Manasseh, man. There is no reason for you to worship these, false idols such as the image of Cesar Borgia, man. This man here, and everyone knows about this man, by the way. This is a famous chief here, man. They got a statue here, right here. They tied him up to a tamarind tree and they burned him alive, man. But then, Cubans to this day, man. Let's see what Cubans look like. Cubans to this day, so-called Cubans, man, they still worship white Jesus, man. And in that land of Cuba, by the way, too, there's a bunch of tares, man, because, these Spaniards had their way with our females, man. But, we are, we also intermingled, we also mingled the holy seed, right? But, yeah, man, this is what the Cubans, so-called Cubans look like. They're a dark people, all right? Now, one last article that I want to show is, these ancient stones with Hebrew writing found in that island, all right? It says, a remnant of ancient stones, 20 of 800, made its way halfway across the world, solving a 3,500-year-old mystery. What did these stones whisper about the pre-Columbian indigenous people of the island of Puerto Rico? After rigorous academic testing, anthropologists, historians, academics, and millions of Puerto Ricans finally have scientific evidence that reveals the language of the stones. Now, this is going into the Puerto Ricans, right? But keep in mind, we all knew where we live. So just like Hatue traveled from Haiti to Cuba, we were traveling amongst each other. Just as Asher and Zebulon were trading with each other, so were these other tribes, man. And so let's continue on. It says, okay. Knowledge of these stones first came to light when a very sick Taino woman who had tried everything from indigenous herbal remedies to ceremonies lay on her deathbed, compelled to tell a secret her family had carried for generations. She sent runners to find someone in the church who would listen. Why she chose the church, we'll never know. But a monk named Jose Maria Nazario y Cancel came to her bedside. What this elder revealed to this monk changed the historical narrative of our precious island. Now, this is that, looks like an Edomite Spaniard, so-called monk. It says, there in her tiny bohio, which is a thatched roof home, the monk interceded for the old woman's healing. Then she told him her family secret, a secret that went back to the time of Cacique Aguabana, the principal chief of the Borican, the Taino Indian name for Puerto Rico, which means the house of the great and valiant Lord. Through the Spirit, that's that zeal without knowledge, man. Because Scripture says in Jeremiah 17:4 that we would forget who we were, right? But through the Spirit, we still had that zeal without knowledge, man. Thus, you see the house of the great and valiant Lord. It said, her secret revealed where to find a hidden stash of stone figurines inscribed with strange symbols and carvings of an ancient people that some call the Hibaro, who had lived in the mountains of the island and still have descendants who call themselves by this name of this day. Now, that word Hibaro, does that not sound like Abrayath, right? Which is Hebrew, right? I mean, this, watch, let's just continue on. It says, Nazario had been educated at the University of Salamanca. His studies had included ancient languages, and he was amazed at what he saw. After comparing the writing on these stones to others from around the world, he came to his conclusion. This writing was a form of ancient Hebrew. Because of his religious background, this fueled the possibility that the remnant of the lost tribes of Israel had settled on this land. See, this is history that we don't even know about. It says, in 1893, Nazario wrote a short article titled Escritura Aborigen de Caribe, in which he explained his interpretation of these carvings. After a thorough analysis of the stones and their inscriptions, he dismissed an Arawak Taino language origin by 1897, he concluded that the writings were more reminiscent of ancient Hebrew. That's the Lashon Kadash, man. Comparing this discovery with the spoken Taino language of his day, Nazario discerned words in the Taino Arawak language that were Semitic in origin and pronunciation. One example is the Taino name for the supreme spirit of spirits, Yah. By comparison, the God of the monotheistic Hebrew culture is known by the abbreviated form of his sacred name, Yah, which we know is Yahweh. All right, so it just goes, how did these artifacts get there? Well, they were either brought there or they were made there, but the point here is that they were written in the Hebrew, man. So it just goes to show you, the indigenous people of Cuba were the so-called are the tribe of Manasseh. These are the tribes mentioned in Second Ezra, man. So there you have it. We've gotten the physical attributes of the people of the land. We've shown how they resemble to the Puerto Ricans, which are Ephraim, right? And we've also shown that they are under the curses, and we've also shown that there was Hebrew stones found, man. Why? Because it all points to them being of the 10 tribes. So hopefully this lesson has been edifying, and until the next one, I'm going to say shalom.